Okay, so the title of today's story is Baobab Lee, inspired heavily by a BBC documentary that I saw about baobab trees. Yeah, so let's go. Um, so the story starts off in North Korea. It starts off on the 1st of April in North Korea. The 1st of April is everywhere else in the world, April Fool's Day, which is a joke of a day. It does not even take, it's not, people don't take it seriously. But in North Korea, it's a very serious day because it's the National Workers' Day. Now, the National Workers' Day in North Korea, every single citizen of the country assembles inside the National Theatre and they put on a show and then they celebrate, all the hard work they've put into serving their leader in the country, right? Now, North Korea shares a border with South Korea. A lot of North Koreans actually want to escape into South Korea, right? But the problem is the border is manned heavily by security people, by guards, right? And it is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, throughout the year, except on the 1st of April. Because on the 1st of April, everybody, including the president, is mandated to be at the National Theatre. So if everybody's in the National Theatre, well, there's no point guarding the border because nobody would be there nobody is going to be outside. Everybody's in the National Theatre. Right. Now, one of the people that actually secretly nurses this ambition of one day escaping North Korea into South Korea is a man. His name is Jimmy Lee. He has a wife called Suk Lee, right? So both of them, they have an 8-year-old daughter called Kanji. They have an 8-year-old daughter called Kanji. Now, Jimmy Lee and his wife Suk, they want the best for Kanji. They believe Kanji is like this very talented young girl, and they feel that she has like a better shot of life in South Korea. Now, they love North Korea, is their country. They think is a paradise. They don't actually want to leave it, but they feel that their daughter has like a better shot at life if they moved her over to into South Korea. But like I alluded to earlier, you can't cross. They have a problem because you can't cross the border, right? Okay, cool. So Jimmy came up with a very clever plan. Now, Jimmy is a platoon officer, is a leader of a platoon in the army. So he came up with a very clever strategy. He called Suk one night and told her that, look, we're about 2 days away from the Workers' Day. And as you know, everybody assembles in the National Theatre on the Workers' Day. And the border is left unmanned. If we are really serious about giving Kanji a better shot at life, about taking her to South Korea, this is our chance. We'll probably never get another chance. And if we miss this chance, then we have to wait for another year. And then if we miss that, we have to wait for another year again. So, we have to take our chances now. So Suk too said that she had been thinking about it low-key, but she didn't know how to tell Jimmy. Maybe he would take it the wrong way and betray her and go and tell the leading party, and then they would throw her in jail. So they were like, oh, we have a plan, we're on the same page. So they came up with a plan. Now, the plan was very, very simple, but at the same time, it was very risky. The plan was that Jimmy is the leader of a platoon, right? Now, Jimmy's platoon is supposed to hold a parade in the National Theatre on the Workers' Day. Now, Jimmy, being the leader of the parade, is going to drive there's a parade vehicle. It's not the fastest vehicle in the world. It's quite slow. It's just meant for parades, literally. So Jimmy's supposed to drive that vehicle, and then his platoon members are supposed to march behind him, and then they'll do their, they'll salute the leader, and then the leader will salute them and then they will have done their part of the Workers' Day, right? Okay. So Jimmy's plan was quite ingenious. His plan was that, look, since I'm supposed to drive the car, it means we have a getaway car. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sabotage the car just before the parade starts, and then I'll tell them to go ahead, that I'll be behind them, and then I'll tell them I'm going to fix the car. While I'm trying to fix the car, you people take Kanji with you, make your way to the back of the National Theatre. I'll be waiting there with the parade car. Again, it's not the fastest car in the world, but if we can make it to the border before you notice that we're there, before they notice that we are missing. So that was the plan. Now, both of them at the back of their minds, they knew that the plan was, there was a 99% chance of the plan failing. Why? Because the parade car was not very fast. It was a parade car. It was not very fast at all, right? And the distance between the National Theatre and the border was about 15 minutes. And it would take the parade car way more than that to get to the National Theatre, to get to the border from the National Theatre, because it was so slow. But it was the only chance that he had. So on the day of the parade, Jimmy went ahead with the plan. He sabotaged the car, and then he told his platoon members to go ahead of him, and that he was going to stay back and try to fix the car. So they went ahead of him, and then Sook brought Kanji, put her in the car, and then he started their getaway. And for the first 10 minutes, he looked as if their plan was going to work. And they drove as fast as they could. It was a very windy morning. They drove against the wind, literally, and they drove as fast as they could. The wind was racing at them. Their hearts was racing. But the only thing that wasn't racing was the car. It was literally crawling, right? So about 10 minutes into their sojourn, people in the National Theatre, they had suspected that something was off, because Jimmy was very, very nervous, and Sook was missing because Sook was responsible for sewing the garments for the costumes, for most of the costuming for the event, right? So, the women they were looking for her. So they didn't know where. So that was where the red flag started going off, right? So very quickly they discovered that they were missing, and if they were missing, there was only one place they could be. They were escaping, right? So 10 minutes after they started looking for them, they sent guards in the fastest car to patrol guards to catch them and bring them back or kill them. So eventually, like I said, Jimmy and Sook, they drove as fast as they can with Kanji in the car. But it was a parade car, so they couldn't get too far. So they were about a minute away from crossing the border when the patrol vehicles, about 10 of them, they literally caught up. They had them in their line of sight. And then they asked them politely, in fairness to the patrol vehicles, to stop. And if they stopped and they turned themselves inside, that the leader of North Korea might pardon them, because it was in a very happy mood, and it was the Workers' Day. So their chances of being executed on the Workers' Day was very, very low, that they should just stop. But Jimmy had made up his mind. Sook had made up her mind. They were just so determined to give Kanji a better life. So it didn't stop. So they had no options but to start firing at them. But in fairness again to the North Korean soldiers, they didn't want to kill them. So they just fired at the tires, right? So they took out one tire. The car was crawling. Another tire, it was even slower. Took out all the 4 tires, but they didn't shoot at them, right? At this point, Kanji was crying, Sook was screaming, but Jimmy was determined. He was this is a do or die affair for him. So when he saw that the car was literally crippled, he came out of the car and then he started running. He grabbed Kanji, he took Kanji from Suk, and then he started running. And then Suk got out of the car and she started running too, but she knew that they were going to kind of like shoot at Jimmy, so she kind of acted like a human shield, and they shot at her a couple of times, and then she fell down, and then they started shooting at Jimmy, but Jimmy was already prepared for that eventuality, so he wasn't really bothered about it. So they shot him a couple of times. He fell down, but like I said, they were just like a minute away from the end of from the border to South Korea, so he managed to get Kanji over to the border, but he has sustained too many wounds, so unfortunately, yeah, he made it, but they dragged him back. They dragged him and Kanji. Him and his wife Suk. They actually didn't die. They made it, but they dragged them back into. They dragged them back into the country, and like the guards actually said, they said they were going to get a pardon, so they actually did get a pardon eventually down the line. But so it was almost as if they ate their cake and he had it. But the problem was their daughter Suk, Kanji, was now on the other side of the border. She was in South Korea now. Now at the South Korean border, because there are a lot of escapees from North Korea into South Korea. There's like this organization, like the Red Cross, and their job is just to help like those escapees get reintegrated into the society, into the South Korean society. So immediately they saw what happened with Jimmy and Kenji and Kenji. They took Kenji and they basically they adopted her essentially. They raised her essentially. Now Kenji was like a very she was very, very brilliant essentially. She was very smart. So she had and she was loved by the whole community. It takes a community to raise a child, right? So it was the whole community. She lived in a town that was very close to the border because she did not want to stray too far away from her parents. She believed that, they were still alive in North Korea and she didn't want to stray too far from them. So she requested, even at that very young age, that she wanted to live in a border town, in that border town that was very close to North Korea, which is where she actually grew up in. So it came time for her to go to college. She grew up there. She would sob about seeing her parents, but so the time came for her to go to college. And then, which meant that she had to leave our border town, right? So just as a tribute to her parents and the sacrifice they made for her, she decided to go and buy flowers and then place the flowers at the border where her dad was, where her dad fell essentially. So she didn't go to the market actually. She went into the field, into the forest, and she picked wild flowers because her parents made a wild heroic act to save her essentially. So she picked the wildest roses she could find, and then she brought those roses to the border, right? Now as she was dropping those roses off, she was crying, right? Now at the border there were stationed United Nations soldiers that were manning the border, right? Now one of the soldiers, his name was Alejandro. Okay. His name was Alejandro. Now Alejandro was a Welshman actually. He was from Wales, but he grew up in Sao Paulo. He was a very kind, very nice man. He was 24 years old. He was 24 years old when he joined the United Nations, and he was posted. His first deployment was the border. the North Korea South Korea border. So it was there. So he literally saw Kanji like putting down the roses and crying. So he walked up to her, he consoled her, asked her what happened. She gave him the lowdown. Cut the long story short, they fell in love, and 2 months after that, Kanji discovered that she was expecting a baby, right? But she didn't want the baby because she was going to college, essentially. She was supposed to have gone to college. She just decided to delay the whole traveling because she had just met this Alejandro guy that she was head over heels with. Now, Alejandro, on the other hand, wanted the baby, right? But Kanji didn't want the baby. In fact, she wanted to abort the baby. The only reason why she didn't abort the baby was because she was living in this small border town, and literally everybody in town raised her. Remember that it takes a village to raise a child, and it was a very conservative Christian town, so she could not, abortion was not even on the table, literally. So she had to have the child, right? So, but she made up her mind that she was going to have the child and put him up for adoption. So she deferred her admission at university for a year. She had the child. She named the child Lee after her dad, because her dad's full name is Jimmy Lee. So she named the child Lee after her father. And immediately she had the child, basically, she put the child up for adoption, right? She made sure that she had the child in an hospital which was in the capital of Korea, which was Seoul. She didn't have the child in the border town. She made sure it was in Seoul, right? And Alejandro was not aware of it. So by the time Alejandro found out what was happening, number one, Kanji had already traveled to Kanji had already started school in Seoul, in Korea, in University of South Korea, I think so. So she had already started school there, and UN had already, to make matters worse for Alejandro, the UN redeployed him and his troops, and is like his team, essentially. They redeployed them to, I don't know, Sudan. Okay, so Kanji put the baby Lee up for adoption, and Lee was adopted by foster parents. The name of the man was, our foster dad was Henry. The name of our foster mom was Glinda. Let's say Glinda. The name of our foster mom was Glinda. So Henry and Glinda adopted Lee, which is the daughter of Kanji, right? So Henry is Glinda is a factory worker. She works at the factory that makes cookies. Henry, on the other hand, Henry is a paragliding instructor. He teaches people how to paraglide. His passion is paragliding, right? So they adopted Lee, and then he took her back to the United Kingdom. No, they took her back to the United Kingdom, essentially. They were staying in Sunderland, the United Kingdom. So they took her back to Sunderland. So Lee grew up in Sunderland with her foster parents, and she grew up, and they made sure she didn't lack anything. They gave her all the love and affection she needed, and they were kind of very open with her from the ground up that they were not her real parents. And then her biological parents gave her up. Her biological mother pretty much gave her up for adoption immediately she was born, right? So Lee grew up like holding some resentments towards her biological mom, essentially. Right. So fast forward to when Lee was 16 years old. She came back from school one day, and then she saw Glinda crying. She was wailing, actually. And Henry Henry was sobbing. Then she was like, what happened? At first, she thought maybe their cat had died, so she ran out of the yard to see what happened to the cat, and she saw that the cat was actually fine. It was sick, but it was fine. So she was like, okay, the cat is not dead. So why are they like wailing like this? So she went to meet them, and then, she was asking them, but they couldn't talk. And then she noticed that there was like this piece of paper on the coffee table. So she picked the piece of paper and then she read it, and the paper was like, essentially, it was a court injunction. Essentially, they were literally forcing their hand to release Lee, because apparently she was not legally adopted. So essentially, who was people forcing Henry and Glinda to give up Lee? Well, surprise, surprise, it was Alejandro and Kanji. So apparently, Alejandro had become a diplomat, a very rich diplomat, right? He became successful in the United Nations. He ended up becoming a diplomat. He was even at some point considered to be to lead the UN at some point. That's how high he had rose in the ranks. And Kanji was this very successful author. She had published many books, and she was very respected. Yeah, okay, cool. So because of their status in the society and because of the weight of the amount of power that they had, they basically pulled their weight in the society, and they wanted their daughter back. Now, Alejandro was the one actually pushing to want the daughter, because he always wanted the daughter. He never supported the idea of like the adoption, right? Because it was, in fairness to him, it was beyond his control. So as soon as he became successful enough, he went back and, in quotes, did the right thing, right? He went back and did the right thing. But, he already had like a daughter too. And when he went back to Kanji also already had another daughter, but so it was, so even though they got back together, they both had like a child each from like different marriages, essentially. So eventually, now again, Henry was sobbing, Glinda was sobbing, but there was nothing they could do. In a week, they had to like turn over Lee to biological parents, which was Alejandro and Kanji. Okay, cool. Now, Lee hated. Naturally, she did not like our biological parents. She kind of like hated them. Number one, for like giving up for adoption, and then number two, for like, literally forcing our foster parents to give her up for them just because they had money, right? Now, Alejandro was very apologetic, and he was always very apologetic, and he was always trying to explain things to her. But, Lee would not have wouldn't have any of it, right? And on top of that, Lee also did not like her stepsisters, even though they tried to like be as nice as they could to her, but she just didn't like them. She didn't want anything to do with family, right? And she couldn't wait to get out of that whole environment. So fast forward to when, now that whole saga was when she was 16 years old. So she was 19 years old now. So 3 years had passed, yeah? And she was supposed to go to college. Now, because she did not like her biological parents, she wanted to get as far away from them as possible. So instead of applying to all these schools in the UK, she applied to like an Ivy League school in America, which was Harvard, right? Let's just say Harvard. So she got into Harvard, right? And she got into Harvard. And now, Lee's birthday is the 1st of January. Now, on the 1st of January, people make like New Year resolutions. They have like these New Year resolutions, people have all these like crazy New Year resolutions, right? Now, Lee's birthday falls on the 1st of January. So it's like a double-edged sword for her that, one, she has this she has to celebrate New Year's, and then at the same time, she also has to like be making all these resolutions, So she has to be on one hand very serious, and on the other hand very, very be like a party animal at the same time, essentially. So so in this case, right, it was like she was celebrating three things. Number one, she had just gotten into Harvard. She just came back home from Harvard for Christmas, and it was her birthday, and it was also the New Year. So Alejandro and Glinda decided to like seize that opportunity and try to like make things straight with her. But the best way they knew how to do stuff like that was with money. They were rich, and they just felt when you have a problem, you throw money at it, right? So they just wanted to throw money at it. They just like, we're just fucking going to throw money at this shit. And throw money at it they did. So they bought a Ferrari and $100,000, and they had like a check of $100,000 and an all expense paid trip to Brazil for everybody in the family, including now they knew Lee was not going to agree to the trip because she didn't like them. So in order to like kind of like force her hand into going on the trip, they decided to also invite our foster parents, which was Glinda and Henry, right? So on her birthday, they essentially, they gave her the key, they gave her the $100,000. She didn't care that much about both of them. But when she saw the all expense paid trip with Henry and Glinda, she was like elated. She was like, she was like over the moon, right? Because now she was going to get to see our foster parents. Now, she hadn't seen her foster parents since she left them because Kanji put a restricting order on them, so they could not see her, right? Right, okay, cool. So this was the first time she was going to see them in 3 years. So she was not going to pass up on that opportunity for the world, for anything in the world. She wasn't going to pass up on it. So she reluctantly, she agreed to whatever conditions they were, whatever they wanted her to be happy. Okay, I'm happy. Let's just fast forward to when we go for this vacation, essentially. Right. Now, meanwhile, on Henry's side of things, on Henry and Glinda's side of the pond, right? Henry was like slowly slipping into depression, right? But Henry had this like, he had this school where it was like I said, he's like a paragliding instructor, right? So he had this school where he was giving paragliding lessons, right? Kind of like, giving paragliding lessons essentially. So he had this student that was like, is like a popular kid in school, very athletic, very handsome, very 6'4", blue eyes, blonde hair, dark hair, the quintessential tall, dark, and handsome. All the girls liked him. His name is Jones, essentially. His name is Jones. Henry Jones, Indiana Jones. Sorry. His name is Jones. But all the girls liked Jones, right? But while Lee was still with her foster parents, yeah, because all the girls are like, they liked Jones. Lee hated Jones, like, because he just felt, he used to act as if he was like, like people needed to worship the ground he was walking on, that kind of thing. So she hated his guts, right? Because he was like proud, he was like arrogant, he was like always like feeling himself essentially. So she hated him, right? But after Lee was forcefully expelled from her foster parents, the relationship, because Henry now didn't have a child of his own anymore, the relationship between him and Jones just started growing because Jones was the best student he had essentially, and Jones was also Henry was like 6'4", Jones was also like 6'4", so they were like kind of like the tallest people in class in his school. So they kind of like, it was the relationship was mutual essentially. So Henry was like the cool paragliding uncle that Jones didn't have, and Jones was like the quintessential replacement for Lee essentially in the eyes of Henry. So when this opportunity for this all expense paid trip in quotes came up, right? Jones was like, you know what? Henry was like, you know what? I'm going on this trip. Glinda too was excited to go on this trip because they wanted to spend some time with with Lee, right? But you know, because of the proximity, the level of closeness that Henry and Jones had, Henry also invited, because it was family at this point, so he just invited him also for the trip, right? So Henry, Jones, Glinda, Kenji, Alejandro, Lee, and our two stepsisters, they got on the plane, and then they went to Brazil. They went to Brazil for the retreat, right? So when they got to Brazil, again, because they were still in this festive mood and they were trying to celebrate celebrate Lee's birthday, right? They were just trying to celebrate her birthday, you know. So they had this huge dinner table, they threw a party for her. She was happy actually because, again, her foster parents were around. And she brought a therapist along with her. She got this therapist on the internet that she really liked. So our therapist was also there. She was in therapy, right? So her and her therapist had actually been talking, and her therapist had told her that, you have to hunger doesn't scale. At the end of the day, these people are your parents. You have to respect them. Yada yada yada. The whole Omoloabi talk, if you will, right? So at the dinner table, right? Alejandro took the opportunity and kind of like explained in detail what happened to Lee, how he actually wanted to keep her, but he was deployed. He had all the letters. He showed her all the letters he was writing Glinda, and he kind of defended Glinda too. That, look, you don't even know what your mom has been through. Her parents literally had to made the ultimate sacrifice for her to make it into South Korea. She grew up fending for herself, so this is the only life that she knows, because life was not kind to her from scratch. So Glinda so Lee kind of saw her parents backstory a little bit, so she kind of felt sorry for them, and she started sobbing, and he started sobbing, and then her foster parents too started sobbing, and then they had all these mushy kumbaya family moments together. And then after the dinner, right, Lee said she wanted to get some, she wanted to chill outside. So she went to chill outside. And her therapist followed her, right? So her therapist was like, so what are you going to do now? She was like, first thing tomorrow morning, I want to go paragliding, We're in Sao Paulo. There's the Amazon. There are a lot of mountains here in Brazil. I want to go paragliding. And they were like, we had a pretty emotional few hours just now. We don't think this is the best time somebody should be paragliding, especially you. Something might happen. You're too excited at this moment. She was like, no, I'm perfectly fine. I just want to go paragliding. So they didn't want to jinx it, because the family was now having this moment of peace. So they didn't want to ruin it by denying her a paragliding request. So they decided to grant it, but they granted it on one condition. Now the condition was that Henry could not go because Henry was pushing, 75 at this point. Yeah. So it was just an instructor. It wasn't paragliding anything, right? But he had this successor, in quote, called Jones, right? That he brought with him. That meanwhile is the arch enemy of Lee. So the consensus was that she could go paragliding, but she had to be accompanied by surprise, by Jones, right? And she was like, you know what? Forget it. If this motherfucker is going to paraglide with me, I'll rather not paraglide. This guy is so full of himself. Yada 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 yada. She just went on that tirade, but the psychologist kind of convinced her that, you know what, you should give people a chance. Give people a chance. So she was like, okay, let me give him a chance. So she gave him a chance, and then they went first thing that morning. They went They went into the jungle together. They climbed, they hiked the hills together, and they around 12 noon, the winds were perfect, or so they thought. So they decided to paraglide. And so as soon as they started paragliding, what they didn't know was that there was like a not mini tornado of some sort, like cruising through the Amazon forest. So the route that they had planned, they took that route, and then essentially they ran into that tornado, right? They ran into that wind, essentially. And then that wind, just took them and blew them, essentially. It took them and controlled them, essentially, and blew them off course, essentially. So they had to, when you're paragliding, you are descending, essentially. You're descending. So this wind gave them some elevation, but it took them far off course, right? So in the end, they crash landed, right? Now, when they landed in was far from where they originally, again, they are off route, yeah? So, but this place was very, very weird. Now, unknowing to them, they had actually landed in the evil forest part of the Amazon. You see, the Amazon had this part of it that was like evil that nobody in the public was aware about, right? It was like the most well-kept secret of the Amazon. It was very, very evil. It was like nobody had ever gone in and come out. And literally everybody had tried. In fact, the top, the top wildlife researchers, top wildlife media personalities, even some of them working for big companies like, I don't know, National Geographic, they had gone into that forest and they didn't return. And then, companies like National Geographic had to cover up and say, oh, he was like stung by a stingray. They just like made up a story just to not let the public know what happened exactly to those explorers, because they couldn't come up and say, look, there's this part of this Amazon that is so evil that, nobody must set foot in, essentially. They couldn't say that. And it was impossible to use drones or any form of satellite imagery to look through that part of the Amazon, because like I said, it was covered in baobabs, and which was weird. Baobabs growing in the Amazon, which is that doesn't even make any sense, you see. But it was, like I said, it was a very weird part of the Amazon, and it was the evil part of the Amazon. So no light was coming into that place. No light was going out of it. So as their fate will have it, they got blown into that part of the Amazon, the evil forest part of the Amazon. Okay, cool. So when he landed, right, of course, the blame game started. Whose fault is it? Lee was she placed all the faults. She laid all the faults carefully at the feet of Jones, and Jones was not having it. It was they didn't like each other, essentially. So they had this huge argument, and Jones was like, you know what? I can't stand this shit. I'm just going to go this way. Find your own way. Me, I'm going to find my own way. She was like, perfect. I was hoping you were going to say that. So they both split up. Jones went one way, and Lee went the other way, right? So Jones was going on his own. He walked for about 10 miles, and then he started hearing the sound of people chopping, trying to chop down a tree, two people. So we hear po 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 po, people swinging axes at a tree, right? So when he heard that sound, he walked very briskly and saw a man and his son, or something that they were tribal people, right? Swinging their axes, these very sharp axes, at a tree, a baobab tree. But the problem was, no matter how hard they swung the axe, it would cut the baobab tree, but the tree would heal up immediately. So it was almost as if they were the labor was futile, essentially. It's what are you doing? So he was at first he was baffled with that sight. So he kind of said hi to them, and they did not they pretended that they didn't even see him. It was almost as if they didn't see him. So he went over, he touched the man, he tapped him. He was like, "Hi, I'm talking to you. Can you tell me the way out of here?" The man didn't respond. He was just busy singing his axe. His child too, he went over to the younger boy too and tried to talk to him. The boy too was just like, he didn't listen to him. It was almost as if he was not there. So he stayed there for 30 minutes trying to talk to them, and I tried to but he didn't get any response out of them. So he was like, you know what, fuck it. Fuck these people. I'm just going to go on my way. So he was like, I'm just going to go on my way. So he went on his way. Or so he thought. Yeah? Now, Lee, on the other hand, also encountered those men, and the same thing happened to her. She tried to talk to them. And they wouldn't budge. Do you understand? So she went on her way again. And then they trekked for 2 days. And at the end of the 2 days, they ended up at this very same spot that they had started from. Right? So they met again. And they were like, what are we doing here? Like, so immediately they quickly figured out that, they figured out that they were going in circles, essentially. So they had to talk to each other. So Lee was like, you know what? I don't know where you've been, but, everything in this forest looks like the same thing. And it's almost as if this forest is alive. It's almost as if the path is moving, the trees are moving, literally. And, everything is constant. It's like a maze, like it's moving around, right? And Lee was like, yeah, I noticed too. And I saw this weird, so she was like, I encountered this weird man and his son, and they were like chopping this tree, and the tree wasn't having it, and I kept trying to talk to them, and they wouldn't just listen to me. He was like, oh, you saw them too? I was like, yeah, I did. So they were like, okay, you know what, let's try to find them, and together, let's see if we can stop them from chopping the tree, force them from chopping the tree. And if we can force them from chopping the tree, they can maybe tell us how we can get out of here if we find them there, because they assumed they will have finished chopping the tree and gone home or something. So they were just like, we'll just wait there. So as they were approaching again, they started hearing that sound. They were like, they're still there. So when they got there, they were like, Lee went over to, the plan was Lee was going to grab the younger child, and Jones, being the guy, will grab the older man, and then they will stop them from chopping the tree, and they'll force them to talk to them. So they tried to implement their plan, but it fell through literally, because apparently the man was a spirit and his son was a spirit, or a hologram, if you will. So we can't even catch them, but we are hearing the sound, we are seeing, the whole ground was filled with little barks from the tree that had been cut down by just this constant axing at it. But it was constantly replenishing itself. So I was like, the fuck is happening? So they were very, very confused, essentially. And then it dawned on Lee that so Lee was like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? So she sat down, and then she was very frustrated, and then she started crying. She was crying, and then, Jones didn't like her. They still didn't like each other. But Jones was like, you know what, we are tired, we are lost. We've been in this forest for 2 days now. We found these motherfuckers, they're not talking back at us. So he tried to console her. And then he sat down, but she just kept crying. So just in a way to keep her from crying, he started singing to her, right? So he started singing to her, and then she also started singing. So the two of them were they were singing the same song. Let's just assume they are singing, I can show you the world, a whole new world. Let's assume that's what they were singing. Okay, cool. So they started singing that song. So as soon as they started singing like this, they noticed that the more they sang, the less of that sound, that axe sound that they were hearing, that po, po, po. So it would be po, and then they'll be singing a whole new world, and then they won't hear the other po, the adjacent po, they will not hear it. So it was one, okay. So it was okay, I think this singing is kind of affecting these people. So they got up, and then they started singing even louder, and they were walking towards those like towards that man and his child. Eventually, by the time it got to them singing very loudly, they discovered that the man was no longer chopping the wood, and the child was no longer chopping the wood. They were gasping for breath. They were on the floor gasping for breath. So they stopped. When they saw that sight, they were surprised and they stopped singing. And then immediately they stopped singing, the man and his child, they just sprung up and they were swinging their axes at the tree again. Po, 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 po. They were like, okay, we fucking get it now. So if we sing, they stop chopping their axe, yeah? And they get to rest. But if we stop singing, so they started singing. And that's when, like, Lee remembered that he had, like, that was an iPhone. That's when Lee remembered that she had like an iPhone. You know what I'll do here. Okay, I know what I'll do here. Lee remembered that she had like an iPhone with her, right? But iPhone did not have like a Spotify subscription, so it was Apple Music that she used. So she played. She decided to play music from her Apple Music, yeah. And then when she played music, where the man, because again the rule is just music, right? So the man and his child, they stopped chopping the tree, and then they were gassed. They fell on the floor and they were resting and they were resting and they were resting. So after about like an hour of like her playing like different playlists, just shuffling to different playlists, right? they kind of like the man finally got his like him and his child, they kind of got their what's it called? And they got their strength back, and then the man was like, thank you for coming to help us. That apparently that it was like somebody that they were actually under a spell, actually, that they were like, this Slavic mythology stuff, right? I said I was going to borrow like a lot of stuff from Slavic mythology, right? So that they were like under a spell. And that the spell was that a witch came along, and the witch was like they should sing, and then they refused to sing for the witch while they were cutting a tree, and then the witch was like they will keep like swinging their axes at the tree until somebody came along to sing for them, right? So thankfully, Lee and what's his name and Jones had come along and they sang for them, and they sang long enough that spell was essentially broken. So that spell broke, and then that man and his child, they actually literally gained their form back, so they were fully human now. So they were very, very thankful to Lee and Jones, and they were like, so how can we help you? One good turn deserves another, right? So they were like, we're just trying to find our way out of here. I was like, you're trying to find a way out of here? I was like, yeah, okay. So like, that's very easy. Just follow us. So they followed them, and then they led them out they essentially just led them out very easily. And then the man was like, we're sorry, we can't go beyond this. And they were like, why can you not go beyond this? Like, well, if we go beyond this, like, we have been chopping this, we have to go back and chop the tree, and we cannot, we have been here for... Okay, so that forest exists it has its own weird time rules, essentially. So they couldn't go beyond it, right? Maybe tomorrow when I'm telling the story, I'll try to like come up with the reason why they couldn't go beyond it. I'll flesh it out. But for now, they just could not go beyond that border. So they was like, okay, you guys can cross now. So they crossed, and Lee and what's his name? Lee and Jones said bye to them, and then Lee, as a gift, gave them like, let's say, an iPhone, and then so that they'll always have music with them. And those ones, they lived happily ever after. And so they left, right? So it was now. So Lee and Jones continued on their sojourn inside the evil Amazon forest, right? So it was at this point it was getting late. It was around like, I don't know, around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. It was around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And then they was like, you know what? Let's just sleep. We've had like a very long day. Let's just sleep. So they put their head down to sleep. Meanwhile, there was like a stream not very far from where they are. So they had actually taken water. They had rested a little. So they were sleeping under a tree, this very big tree with like a huge canopy, right? So they were like a few um there were a few, let's say 200 meters away from the water, right? So they're like, yeah, let's just sleep. So immediately put their head down to try to sleep, right? Again, they started hearing like a baby crying. They were just hearing like this baby crying, like ah. And then they'll wake up like, so Lee woke like Jones up, like, can you hear that? Jones was like, yes, I can hear it. It's a baby crying. So they was like, let's investigate it. So they stood up and they were looking for like crying baby, right? But it wasn't like a child. It was like a 3-year-old essentially crying. So they tried to investigate it, but they noticed that the sound was coming from like, it was coming from it was coming from the water essentially. So from the stream. So they went to the stream, and then anytime I go to the stream, they will not see the person crying. The crying will stop. And then they will go back to their tent. Immediately go back to their tent. To their under the canopy of the tree they were sleeping. They will hear the sound. They will hear that child crying again. Like the fuck. Right? So they'll go, come. So they did that for a while until it occurred to Jones that he was like, you know what, let me just climb up this tree. And then let me try to see. Lee should pretend as if she's going to the stream. Jones will climb up the tree. And then, just to see what was happening. So essentially, Jones discovered that anytime that he saw Lee, so as Lee was approaching the stream, right, she discovered that it wasn't actually a child. It was actually like a man, but the man was like 4 feet tall, essentially. It was very short, 4 feet tall. He was wearing this Star Wars like shining white robe, essentially. He looked like a stormtrooper, but it was like 4 feet tall, essentially. So like, okay. So Jones was like, you know what, don't let's. So when Lee came back, right, she was like, did you see him? Did you see what was? He was like, yeah, I saw him. It was like a baby stormtrooper crying. And so it was like, baby stormtrooper, that doesn't even make any sense. So it's like, okay, climb up the tree and see. So they climbed up the tree, and then they saw the guy crying, and then they saw that the guy was just pointing his hand at like at inside the water, and he was crying, pointing inside the water, and was crying, pointing. It's like, the fuck, this doesn't make any sense. So they came down, and then when he got outside, they didn't see the person crying again. So they were like, not crying again. But they were like, you know what, let's just investigate what he's pointing at. So they looked at it was just water. So Lee's a good swimmer. So Lee was like, you know what, I'm just going to like take a swim and see what's down there. And Jones was like, are you crazy? It's late. It's like the Amazon. This place is like creepy. There's a lot of like, it's a mythical forest, yada yada yada, yada 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 yada. Like, you can't do that. I won't let you do that. By this time, Jones was kind of like developing feelings for Lee. Sorry, this is like I'm trying to do enemies to lovers story, but I don't have like any experience behind it. And I'm trying to incorporate some like Slavic / African mythology, mythism, everything. I'm trying to like blend everything together. Sorry. Let me get back to the story. Like I said, tomorrow I'll try to like flesh it out into a proper story. I don't know. I also even don't know if that music part, I don't know if it makes sense. We'll just do. I'll just say they kept singing. Because their battery will have died. I don't know. Okay, let us say they kept singing. They just kept singing. Till. Let's just leave it. I don't know. I'll try to like flesh it out. So where was I? So I was where the stormtrooper baby was pointing at water. So it was pointing at water. So Lee swam down, and then she discovered that there was like a golden carpet, at the bottom of the water. So she scooped the golden carpet up, and then she came up. And then immediately she came up with the golden carpet, the stormtrooper guy ran out of like the shrubs, and then came and grabbed the golden carpet from what was her name? From Lee. But he couldn't say anything to them. He just grabbed the golden carpet and ran off laughing, right? So like, that is weird. Okay, so just a note here. Sorry, this story is like is inspired by, in the Bible here, there's this story about Elijah where there was this servant that lost his axe. The head of his axe that he borrowed inside water. And then he went to meet Elijah, and then Elijah said, okay, drop He said, where did you drop the what? Where did you drop the axe? And it was like, here. He pointed it and said here. And it was like, okay. So he took like, I think it was his handkerchief or something, and then dropped it on that surface of the water. And then the axe swam up by itself. So this is like a retelling of it. Ish. There you go. Like I said, I'm remixing a lot of like stories, African, Bible, all these things. I'm putting together. Okay, cool. I'm so sorry. Tomorrow's one will be like a full, proper version, proper story, fleshed out. With all the moon was glistening. It was a cool afternoon. The mosquitoes were chiming in their ears. I'll try to make it as nice as I can, I promise. But this is just me trying to like, this is just the draft that got put in my head, so I'm just trying to put it down. Okay, cool. So that was like their second trial. So the Stormtrooper baby essentially ran off with golden mat, right? Ran off with the golden mat. So she ran off with golden mat. And then they were like, okay, that was weird. What is that golden mat? Why is she crying? So they was like, we have so many questions we don't have answers to. Let's just go back to sleep. We're tired already. So they went back to bed and then he slept. So while Lee was sleeping, she had a dream, Now the Stormtrooper guy was holding like I said he was pointing, right? So he was holding something like it was like a toothpick, So he was holding it in his hand. So in that dream, she saw the Stormtrooper guy come to her in a dream and told her that, and gave her that toothpick thing. And then she was like, what am I supposed to do with a toothpick? Sorry, I don't want to pick my tooth. She was like, no. The Stormtrooper guy was like, no, it's not for your tooth. It's like this toothpick, this thing is actually it's like an anti-gravity like stick. Yeah, if you touch it with anything, that thing becomes weightless and you can move it around anyhow you want. So like, oh, are you serious? Yeah, you should have it. In fact, I actually learned this. She was like, how do you think the pyramids were built? And she was like, the Egyptians built it. They had like laborers, like 20,000 workers. But it was like, nope. I was actually the one that lent them this like toothpick. I gave it to them and they used this toothpick to build the pyramids. So, and when they were done with it, they returned it to me, and that's why you have it here. And I'm giving it to you now. But the only condition is that you must not leave the forest when you're exiting the forest, you must drop it back when you're exiting the forest. So Lee was like, okay, thank you. And then she woke up. But in her mind, she was like, must have been a crazy dream, right? So she didn't pay any attention to it. So the next morning, she told what's his name, Jones, about the dream that she had, the weird dream that she had. And Jones was like, a toothpick. He was like, yeah. It's like, what did the toothpick look like? It was like, it was white, it was like shiny, and he was like, does it look like this? And then he pulled like something from her hair, and she was like, yeah. So when she saw it, she was really shocked. She was like, yeah, it's been in my hair all along. So she told him like a full story of how she had the dream and how the Stormtrooper looking creature told her that, it makes stuff like weightless. So like, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. So they're like, okay, cool. What are we going to try it on? So they're like, let's try it on him. Like I said, this part of the Amazon was covered in like baobab trees. So like, let's try it on a baobab tree. So they went together and they tried it on a baobab tree. And then the baobab tree, lo and behold, became weightless, and they could like move it around. And they started playing with the baobab tree. They were doing pillow fighting with the baobab tree because it was weightless, essentially. 2 baobab trees, essentially. So they kind of took it with them. Lee was like custodian of it, and then they were marching on. Oh, it's almost an hour. I think I'll continue like the story from here tomorrow. Essentially, what happened is that in the end, they had 3 trials. This is like the second trial they've passed. The third trial is with the baobab trees themselves. Yeah. Now in the third trial, right, there's this concept called of a cosmic family. So like everybody's born into a family. You have like brother, your sisters, your uncle, your aunts, yeah, right? Which is your natural family. But there's also like a cosmic family, which is when you are born as a human being, everybody has like a cosmic family. So for instance, you have like a cousin in the cosmos, in the stars. So for instance, you have like a sibling in the stars. So a good example of that would be Jesus, for instance. When Jesus was born, there were some magi, like three wise men. They saw a star in the heavens, and they were like, hey, see that star, that's the star of Jesus, essentially. So that star is like a sibling to Jesus, technically ish. And then Jesus was like, when he grew older, I was like, I am like the lion of the tribe of Judah, essentially. So that is essentially like is co-signing the lions, essentially, which means, lions walk in like parks. There's no lion that roams around, so he must have like fellow lions with him. So essentially, the theory here is that I'm fleshing the story on is that there's a cosmic family, and you have every human being has like a sibling in every biome in the cosmos. So you have a sibling inside the water, for instance. It might be like a shark. Some people call it like a spirit animal. It might be a shark in the water. In the air, it might be a falcon or an eagle or a parrot or a pigeon or a woodpecker. If like a carpenter, for instance, you like carpentry work. You like IKEA. Yeah, your cosmic sibling in the sky might be a woodpecker, for instance, right? And then amongst the trees, in nature too, you have like some people have like trees that is a cosmic sibling to them. So in the case of Lee, our cosmic sibling is a baobab, right? Which is where the story is going, Baobab Lee. But it will take me like another 30-40 minutes to explain this shit, and I just don't have time to because the theory got dropped in my head, like it's kind of like heavy, so I don't have time to be explaining it. But that's basically the gist of it. The gist of it is that eventually they came out of the forest after they did all these trials, and then at that time they had fallen in love, enemies to lovers type shit. And then their families, they thought they had spent 3 months inside they spent 3 months inside the forest, but when they came out, it was actually only 3 days, right? So their families had because time in the forest works like very differently, if you will, and they lived happily ever. So they reunited with their family, and Jones and Lee became like lovers, yada yada yada. Yeah, so I'll flesh it out tomorrow, please. I'm kind of tired. So the name of the story is Baobab Lee. Yeah, Baobab. I don't know how to spell Baobab, but Baobab tree. And D, Leeee. I think there are some parts of it that I need to do exposition on. So that's the story, essentially. Yeah. It's just like a fun take on like all this, like it's a mashup of a lot of things. Yeah. Right. So that's it. I think there's some things I need to really flesh out, like some small. It's a short story, but it's already 1 hour, so I need to like condense it, remove some like details, and then like put some new stuff. Like for instance, there are some places I was playing. So for instance, that place where I said that that they were playing music from their phone. Maybe I could just say they are singing. I could just say, oh, she sang for him for a very long time. All those like North Korea exposition parts, maybe it's not necessary, all those places. I don't know, maybe the backstory. The reason I gave like a backstory for the mom and for Alejandro and Kanji, especially Kanji, is because I just didn't want her to look like this wicked mother that I just wanted to like give her the daughter up for like adoption at the slightest inconvenience that she had. You understand? So I just had to make, if it was going to be a villain in the story, I had to make her like a villain with a backstory, that kind of thing. Right. So I don't know, maybe I'll keep all those elements of the story, or maybe I'll take them out. But yeah, this is like the rough draft for now. This is what God puts in my head. Just that I'll put it down. Again, it's called Baobab Lee. It's like the 8th entry in those stories that I'm writing. I said I was not going to write stories again, but I don't have any work I'm doing now. I'm basically free. I'm waiting for like my M4 for them to for Apple to drop like M4 Mac books and stuff, so I can once it comes out I'll buy it and I'll get back to work. But in the meantime, yeah, I have to keep myself busy. So I want to like finish this book. Maybe I'll have one more story. It's going to be 9, or maybe I'll just make it 8 because 8 is like my lucky number. I'll just make it 8, and then I'll try to like maybe I'll go and get like tomorrow. I'll go and get like a book, like a sketchbook, and try to do. There's all these like design that I want to like. I want to start working on that like head band that watch band headband that I was like that watch face band that I was trying to design. Apple Watch head watch. I don't know. It's like a watch. You know how like we have like watch bands, but this one's for a head essentially. So I want to design it. I want to start also design. There's this collection I want to work on. I said I was going to do like a fashion collection like at the beginning of the year. So I want to all those things I said I was going to do at the beginning of the year. We're getting towards the end of the year now, so I need to be serious in my life. So I need to like try to do most of those creative things that I said I was going to try. And that lo-fi album that I said I was going to work on. Yes, I'm going to still work on it. When I was in the airport in Barcelona, yeah, I actually had like there was this sound that dropped inside my spirit, yeah, and I recorded it small here, right? It's called the name of the song of that is that lo-fi beat is called Lonas in Barcelona. So it's like I saw this woman like Barcelona is like this place where like everybody's like it's like this lovers paradise essentially. So everybody in the airport was like very lovey-dovey. They were just coupled up everywhere. So I was just like the only person that was like just like roaming around. Then I noticed this woman too. She was sitting alone by herself. So it was 2 of us that were like the loners there. So I don't know. That sound just came inside my head. I kind of recorded that tune, right? So the name of the song of that lo-fi track is going to be Loners, as in Loners in Barcelona. Lona Loners in Barcelona, right? Once I get my MacBook, I'm going to try to like make the beat. I used to play with Fruity Loops back in the day, but with all this AI stuff, I should be able to get it out as quickly as I can and watch some like lo-fi tutorials on YouTube. So I think hopefully by the end of December, I should have like a couple of AI apps online, Ogle and the rest. I should have like a working prototype of like this watch face headband that I'm trying to work on. I should, by the special grace of God, I should have like maybe 7 short stories for this book, and I'll try to make them into like I'll try to flesh them out into proper books as much as I can with all these illustrations and like as best as I can. So that'll be like the third thing, and then I should have like a collection, which is like the fourth thing, right? So that's it. So help me God. So help me God. And because I should not do any of these things, I'm just going to drop it. So, but for the most part, I think I don't think where I was, because most of these ideas come from God. So yeah, that's it. So tomorrow I'll try, because again, like I said, I don't have work. I'm not writing code now. So tomorrow, I'll try to flesh out the stories. I'll think about the parts that I think are not necessary, or the parts that I think I did not do enough exposition on, and I'll add and I'll like put them to it. But I'll kind of put this. I think I'll put this version on Instagram. Like just maybe I'll ask like maybe I'll ask one or two people what they think about it, if it makes any sense at all. Yeah, that's it. Not Lonas in Barcelona. Sorry, what's the name of this thing again? Baobab Lee.